three kinds of books: good books, bad books, and books that are so horrible that they make you want to gouge your eyes out and hope that you never had the ability to read in the first place. This video is about books that fall into that third category. Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Rukwita Bhattacharjee and you're watching my channel, which is named after me because I lack creativity, specifically when it comes to naming things. In this video, I'll be talking about the worst books that I read in 2022. I'll bet I did not read much this year as compared to 2021, where I read 95 books. I did read enough to know where my tastes lie and what were the books that I absolutely hated. I'll be starting this list with books that I DNF'd, meaning that these books were so bad that I couldn't even get myself to complete them. I couldn't put in my time and resources to even finish these books. With the top contender being It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I read this one for about 50 to 60% before I just stopped reading it. Now, this isn't a strict no, I'm never picking up this book again. It's more like I do not have the time or resources, meaning my energy, to pour into this book that isn't even good in the first place. It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover begins as your typical romance novel, with our main character being named something extremely weird. In this case, it's Lily Blossom Bloom, and ironically, she wants to be a botanist too. Now, Lily is a new girl in a new city after her father's death, and now she is trying to fit in and open her own botanical store or something like that. I don't even remember what happened in this book at that point. I am suppressing all my memories of this because this was bad. It was very, very bad. Now, Lily Blossom Bloom isn't your generic girl because obviously she's the main character in a romance novel, and this book isn't even romance. I'll get to that bit later. Lily Blossom Bloom has to be quirky, and her quirks generate themselves in the form that she writes diaries to none other than the infamous Ellen DeGeneres. Now, I had to question myself multiple times that is this book really worth it? What real person have you met who writes their diaries to a celebrity? And why Ellen DeGeneres of all people? Like, how culturally significant is she in the Western countries? I mean, why would you have your main characters write diaries to this person who runs a reality TV show? I asked myself this question multiple times throughout my journey of reading this book, and even after I stopped reading it, I am still questioning myself. Like, why was that not an instant red flag for me to stop reading this book? Why torture myself so? Now, the writing style is quite simplistic. It is something that genuinely 12-year-old me with unregulated access to Wattpad would have enjoyed. But since I bought this book with real human money that people have to earn, I did not like it at all. I mean, 12-year-old me had bad taste, but I do not have that taste right now. Now, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover starts with your stereotypical love interest who acclaims how much he loves the main character in almost every meeting he has with her. I mean, in the first three meetings, he just goes on a tirade about how much he wants to be with her, etc., keeping it PG-13 because my parents watch this channel. Anyways, as soon as the main love interest, who I assumed was a love interest at that point, Ryle Kincaid, or however you pronounce it, came up on page, I knew something was wrong about this guy. Especially with the whole there are no bad people, just people who do bad things. Talk about taking away accountability of people for their own actions. And overall, my experience with him was bad. He was the most infuriating and poorly written character ever, and so was his sister in a different way. His sister, who is a side character, a significant side character, as I might say, as much I have read this book, is one of those people who you thought you would never see out of TikTok. She just goes, I'm a bit of a Pinterest girly. I mean, I've never heard a real person say that ever in my life. And she's the side character who just helps Lily set her life up in this new city and get going with her wonderful botanical dreams or whatever she has. Talking about our main character, Lily Blossom Bloom has the personality of an inanimate object. It is her own story, but she has literally no voice or say in how the narrative goes. She is a helpless damsel in distress for most of the novel. Every person who ever screamed about this book and about how good it was, about how much it broke their heart, how much they fell in love with the main characters, was either lying about having read this book or was talking about a completely different book and accidentally just had this in their hand. Honestly, I still don't know why I chose to read this. And honestly, after this, I'm never picking up a Colleen Hoover book again. A funny incident last day. So my school has this thing where they confiscate books all the time. So I had mine confiscate, and on the 21st, it was the last day of school before winter vacation, and our English teacher was like, "I'm returning all your books." And I went into the staff room to get my Terry Pratchett, which was confiscated. And while returning it, I saw that she had a copy of Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover, which she literally refused to return, saying that this book is complete trash and I'm not returning it to you. I was pretty surprised that she read it in the first place and that she had all her brain cells intact by the end of it. But whatever, moving on to the next book. The next book is Normal People by Sally Rooney, which I also DNF'd after reading about 30% of it. Normal People is one of the most pretentious pieces of contemporary literature that I have ever had the displeasure of even touching. This book tries to weave in into the narrative a lot of themes about communism, their class wars, feminism, racism, etc., but ends up making a hodgepodge of it and having no critical commentary on all of the topic that it brings up. Rather, it just brings up social injustices or any sort of political ideology to make its characters seem more of the underdogs. The characters have no personality at all. I mean, the book is in such a passive narrative that I felt like I was not reading a book, but rather watching snapshots of this life of a stranger that I've never seen. 30-second reels would give you more information than reading Normal People by Sally Rooney. I would say that the writing of this book is pretty good. It is a well developed writing style. It could even, I can see why people call it a very well written book. I wouldn't call it so myself, but I can definitely see at some point where mosquitoes, where the writing was applauded by many people. But for me, the writing style just made it even more passive and flat. The pacing of this book was fully off. Sometimes it snapped into the future, sometimes it was a flashback chapter. I think Sally Rooney's refusal to set a concrete timeline for normal people was what ruined the experience for me in many places, as well as that her refusal to use quotation marks. See, I have no problem with books written without proper punctuation, even though I pretend to be a snob at sometimes. My favorite books are written in epistolary format, so obviously quotation marks are not usually used in those format. But when not reading a book that is either written in epistolary format or written in a diary format, I fully expect you to use quotation marks in any and all punctuation that would be required. And I know I sound like a snob right now, but where were my quotation marks? It physically hurt me to read more than 5 or 6 chapters that I read of this. I mean, 5 or 6, I don't even think I read or 6 chapters of this. It had no plot to it as well. I mean, at till this point, after reading as much as I have read of this book, I still don't understand the point of this book. Like, what are you trying to say? What is the meaning of this entire thing? What are the themes? I don't get anything that is going on now. That might just be a me problem, because I might be stupid enough to not be able to comprehend the masterpiece that this is. But I have met a few more people who agree with me, and I'll stay a hater hating on things that I do not like till the end of my days. Thank you very much. Normal People by Sally Rooney is one book that I am never touching ever again. And I actually have a more in depth rant about this book on a separate video, which will be linked in the description. So if you love my beautiful voice and would like to check more of it there, click on that link below and just go. Now, why don't we move on to talking about books that I actually read from cover to cover, prologue till epilogue, and suffered through the entirety of those books? First up is The Carpet Weaver by Neemat Sadat, which I have rated 1.5 stars out of 5. I speak about this book in another video of mine, but enough with the self promotion and more with the talking about why this book was bad and why this book made me wish to tear it apart. The Carpet Fever by Neemat Sadar is set during the dawn of the invasion of Afghanistan by the United States of America, and it revolves around the lives of young boys in Afghanistan who are separated from their community by the regards of their sexuality and their behavior, which are considered to be deviant by not only their own community but by the entire world around. Our main character is meant to be someone to sympathize with, but I genuinely found him to be extremely annoying through the entirety of the book, and that's not even why I disliked this book. The writing is rather underdeveloped. This is more of a book that was written for the sake of being an author than a genuine, passionate experience or something that was written deep from the heart. This was a book that was written to be a bestseller, and the writing portrayed that. The writing was dry and some of the most ingenuine things that I have read in a while. Now, apart from the flaws in the craft of the author, some of the parts of this book were genuinely problematic with the romanticism of assault and pedophilia that was existing through the pages of this book. There are few scenes of romanticism of assault of a minor which was really not only graphic but also weirdly handled, with the main character having a more of a maybe I like it, this is the only way I can express myself. Now in a way this would work if our main character was an unreliable narrator, but our narrator is not an unreliable one. Throughout the entirety of this book, our main character has been solidified as a person who is recounting these experiences that they have gone through with a straight mind and with complete recollection, instead of changing the methodology or the chronology of whatever happened to him, or recounting it in a wrong manner, or having suppressed memories due to the trauma that he went through. Apart from that, I think the ending of the book was why I did not give it 1 star or even 0.5 star. The ending was good. It showed our main character moving on from the things that has happened in his life and collecting his life after the traumatic experiences, not letting his trauma define him. I do believe that this book could have done leagues better in handling multiple topics. I buddy read this with a friend of mine who had similar experiences as of mine with the book itself. With 2 rounds of editing, a bit of rewriting, I think The Carpet Weaver by Neemat Sadat could definitely be a good book. I wouldn't call it a great book, but it has the potential to become a better book. But as of right now, it is not on the stage. I feel like the book was hurriedly pushed through its publishing process without a good editor, and I just feel like there are many areas where this book could be better but still wasn't given much attention to for the sake of painting this as a romance story. I do not think this book is a romance story at all, and I believe that it has been marketed wrongly. It is completely wrong to misdirect readers by calling this a coming of age romance story or a YA romance story. This is neither of those. This is a dark recollection of a person going through a war, a displaced refugee, and the mistreatment of refugees, as well as other things. I think that this book is one book that depends for the person who is reading it. For me, it was not a good one. For other people, it could be better, but it still stands as one of the worst books that I have read this year. Moving on to the next book, it's Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir. An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir is a pretty popular book. It is YA fantasy plus dystopian, where an evil empire has taken over another nation. It is partly inspired by the current situation ongoing in the state of Kashmir right now. Now, I went into this with very high hopes. I had heard a lot of good things about this book by people that I admire, people that I enjoy watching, and a few friends as well. But overall, I did not get what I was hoping for. An Ember in the Ashes is set in an alternative world, like I previously mentioned. One of those things that irked me a lot was for a book that is meant to critique colonialism and a book that is meant as a critique for imperialism, there was a certain lack of both of those things. And by that I mean the critique of both of those things. The book completely disregards its themes of brutality and empire's subjugation of those that it considers less than themselves for the sake of a underdeveloped love triangle that was taking place in the book. I genuinely thought that it would have been better if the book decided to focus more on the dark sides of the empire rather than the love story that they were trying to produce between the two main characters or the two POV characters. And talking about the characters, they were not well developed at all. There was this case of insta love that the characters saw each other immediately and thought that that is the love of my life, which is very, very weird. I think YA as a method of critiquing of history does not work out at all because the genre itself is not meant for those things. Publishers these days won't push for a book if it is YA and has such brutal subjects in it, simply because most readers in my age category, in the YA age category, just won't read those things. And that is evident in this book because it blatantly disregards the themes of itself. It is a narrative foil to itself because it disregards the themes of brutality that it should have critiqued more for the sake of a love story that doesn't even capture the audiences at all, because the characters were not well written at all. They were one dimensional, had no personality to themselves, and overall felt like a knockoff version of characters that previously exist. I believe that this issue with characterization is one that I'm having a lot recently. More of the more of YA that I read, the more I notice that some characters are just the author's, either the author's self inserts or some other characters existing in a popular fantasy novel that the author has completely ripped off downright to the initials. I think that this book as a whole, if I give this series, An Ember in the Ashes series, a second try, I will enjoy the books that are leading on. But as a standalone, as a first book in a series, very little happens in this book to make it a memorable one, and it does not at all encourage the reader to continue on with the series. I genuinely am using that word so much in this video, don't see the charm of this book, and honestly will not be continuing with this series anymore. So the last book on this list is Teething by Megha Rao, which is an open verse style poetry disguised as a book kind of thing. To me, her poetry was nothing unique, but rather poetry written just to be famous. I think this is something that happens a lot with popular people who decide to take up poetry as a side thing because they know that whatever they write, their devote fans will read it and will obviously fund their little passion project as well. I don't say this to be mean, but I just think that some people are not meant to write poetry. I don't say it as a snob as well, but genuine good poetry, poetry that has feelings with it, is very rare these days because that is simply not marketable for the publishing industry. Poetry that is currently marketable is open word style poetry with words like clementines or oranges and tampons and God is a woman thrown in there. And Teething by Megha Rao is the embodiment of all those words that I mentioned because I think she has used all of them at least in five poems of hers in this entire book. There were select poems that I did like from this book, but the rest were just a subpar attempt at copying people who have before tried the style and found fame in it. Some of the most prolific ones that came come to mind is The Sun and Her Flowers by, I have forgotten the poet's name, and Nikita Gill's poetry, who have a similar style to hers and have found fame previously, especially among the teenage audiences who found themselves relating to their poetry. But Megha Rao fails to capture any of that. Her poems are ingenuine, her poems lack passion, and they are type of poems that you will find on Tumblr for free and would not have to buy an expensive book for that. There is no feeling, it feels cheap to, yeah, that is definitely the word I'm looking for. Megha Rao's poetry is cheap, ingenuine, and impassioned. Her words carry no love. Her words carry no weight within themselves. When you read a good poem, you want to remember it. You want to store it in your heart for future reference. But Megha Rao's poetry has none of those things. As I mentioned multiple times throughout this video, I think at this point the publishing industry really focuses on what will sell well rather than what will genuinely leave an impression on the readers, and that kind of thing is what irks me to the most because I as a person and multiple people that I have met want to explore new things, want to discover budding writers who genuinely have the skill and the craft to be a writer instead of a person who just picked up a book and decided to start writing one of their own. These were the five books, the five worst books that I read in the year of 2022. There were a few more that did not feature in this video, but I do hope of bringing them up in the future, sometime at least. And obviously, I will also be making the best books that I read in 2022 video, because I can't just tell you about the things that I hate, despite the fact that I am very much a hater. I do need to tell you about the things that I love as well. Anyways, this was it. If you watched till the end, you're literally one of my favorite persons to ever walk on this planet. Thank you for watching. Be safe and goodbye.